The city was a place of shadows, a maze of narrow, cobbled streets where the sun seemed afraid to shine for too long. The buildings, tall and leaning towards each other as if sharing old secrets, were stained with the grime of years. In this city, there was one name spoken only in a whisper, a name that carried the weight of fear: Lorenzo. He was the Mafia boss, a title that was not given but taken, earned through a fierceness that had chilled the very soul of the place. Lorenzo was still a young man, his face handsome but carved with a permanent scowl, his eyes the color of a stormy sea and just as turbulent. He lived in a world of cold calculations, where men jumped at his command and money changed hands in silent, dark rooms. His office was a reflection of him, richly furnished with heavy dark wood and leather, but feeling utterly empty, like a gilded cage. A single, large window looked out over the city he controlled, but Lorenzo never saw its beauty, only the territories he owned and the ones he had yet to claim. This hardness, this icy shell that surrounded his heart, had not always been there. Once, a long time ago, Lorenzo had been a different person. He had laughed easily and had dreamed simple dreams. His heart had not been made of stone, but had been warm and open, beating only for a girl named Isabella. Isabella had hair the color of dark honey and eyes that held the kindness his life so desperately lacked. They were both young, barely past 18, and he believed they would have a future together. He remembered the exact spot, under the old oak tree at the edge of the meadow where they used to meet. He had asked her to marry him, his heart pounding with a hope that was bright and fragile. But Isabella, whose soul was good and pure, had seen a shadow creeping into him. She had seen his quick temper turning into something darker, his desire to protect twisting into a hunger for power. Frightened of the man he was becoming, her eyes filled with tears, she had shaken her head and told him no. That single word had shattered his world. He had offered her his entire heart, and she had handed it back to him, broken. The rejection was a poison that worked slowly and thoroughly. Lorenzo decided that if he could not be loved, he would be feared. Love was a weakness that left you wounded, but power was a shield that kept you safe. He turned his back on his old life, on the meadows and the sunlight, and walked headfirst into the shadows of the city. He climbed the brutal ladder of the criminal world, his broken heart fueling a cold ruthlessness that made him unstoppable. He became a king, but his throne was built on fear, and his castle was a fortress of loneliness. He no longer believed in God, for what kind of God would give him such love only to have it crush him? He believed only in the power of his own will and the strength of his own two hands. One afternoon, as Lorenzo was reviewing stacks of money collected from various businesses, a visitor was shown into his office. It was Father Marco, an elderly priest from the parish where Lorenzo had been baptized as a baby. The priest's simple black robe was a stark contrast to the rich colors of the room. His face was a roadmap of wrinkles, each one earned from a lifetime of caring for his flock. "Lorenzo, my boy," Father Marco said, his voice soft but steady, not showing any of the fear that others always did. Lorenzo did not look up from his papers. "Father, this is a surprise. Have you come to collect for the poor? I assure you, my business does not mix with charity." "I have come for you, Lorenzo," the priest replied, taking a step closer. "I hear the whispers in the streets. I see the hardness in your eyes. This is not the path for you. Your mother, God rest her soul, prayed for a good life for you." A muscle twitched in Lorenzo's jaw. "My mother is gone. And her prayers died with her. The world is not a kind place, Father. It takes what it wants. I have simply learned to take back." "There is another way," Father Marco pleaded, his hands clasped together. "A way of forgiveness. A way of faith. God has not abandoned you. He is waiting for you to turn back to Him. This power you have built, it is an illusion. It will not keep you warm at night. It will not bring you true peace." Lorenzo finally looked up, a cold, mocking smile on his lips. "Peace? I have more peace now than I ever did with a hopeful heart. Faith is a crutch for those who cannot stand on their own. I stand on my own, Father. I suggest you leave now and go back to your church. Pray for those who need it. I do not." Father Marco looked at the young man with deep sadness in his eyes. He saw the little boy he had once known, now lost behind a wall of anger and pride. He knew words would not be enough today. With a heavy sigh, he turned and walked out of the office, leaving Lorenzo alone once more in his silent, luxurious prison. Lorenzo walked to the window, watching the tiny figures of people moving in the streets far below. He told himself he was above them all, that he needed no one. But the emptiness in the room echoed the emptiness in his chest, a hollow space where a heart once beat, a space that not all the money or power in the world could ever seem to fill. The silence in Lorenzo's office after Father Marco's departure was heavier than usual. It was a thick, suffocating quiet, broken only by the soft ticking of an ornate clock on the mantelpiece. Each tick seemed to echo in the vast, empty space, a tiny hammer striking the walls of Lorenzo's self-made prison. He stood at his window, his hands clasped tightly behind his back, staring down at the city without truly seeing it. The priest's words, though dismissed with a sneer, had stirred something deep within him, a sediment of memory that had long lain undisturbed at the bottom of his soul. He tried to focus on the ledgers, on the lists of numbers that represented his power and his wealth, but the numbers blurred before his eyes, transforming into the remembered image of a young woman's face, a face he had tried for years to forget. The rest of the day passed in a grim, grey haze, his commands to his men delivered with a distracted sharpness that made them scatter faster than usual. He took his evening meal alone, the food tasting of nothing, and retired to his private chambers, where sleep was a fleeting visitor chased away by ghosts of what might have been. The next morning dawned with a bleak, overcast sky, the clouds hanging low and oppressive over the city. Lorenzo was in his office early, attempting to bury the unease of the previous day under a new mountain of work. He was scrutinizing a map of the docklands, planning a new venture, when the sharp, insistent ring of the telephone sliced through the room's silence. It was a jarring, unwelcome sound. Few people had this private number. He snatched the receiver from its cradle, his voice a low growl. "What is it?" The voice on the other end was not one of his men. It was formal, measured, and carried the sterile urgency of a place he never visited. "Am I speaking to Mr. Lorenzo?" the voice asked. "You are. Who is this?" Lorenzo demanded, his impatience growing. "This is Dr. Rossi, from the city hospital." The words landed not like a sound, but like a physical blow to Lorenzo's chest. The hospital. It was a world away from his own, a place of sickness and vulnerability, things he had spent years building walls against. A cold dread, entirely new and terrifying, began to creep into his veins. The doctor continued, his tone clinical yet grave. "I am calling about a patient we have here. A young woman named Isabella. She was admitted 2 days ago with a severe fever. Her condition has deteriorated rapidly. She is fighting for her life." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. The map on his desk, the ledgers, the very room itself, lost all substance. The only thing that was real was the name, Isabella *, spoken aloud for the first time in years, and it echoed in the hollow chamber of his heart. He could not speak, could not breathe. Dr. Rossi, mistaking the silence for confusion, pressed on. "She is unconscious for the most part, but in her moments of feverish wakefulness, she is agitated. She keeps calling out. She keeps saying a name." There was a pause, the soft rustle of paper on the other end of the line. "She keeps saying Lorenzo. We found your contact information among her personal effects. We thought it was vital that you be informed." The receiver felt slick in his hand. The fortress he had built around himself, stone by stone over years of bitterness, crumbled in an instant. The powerful MAFIA boss was gone, and in his place was just a man, a terrified young man who had once loved a girl under an oak tree. The fear he wielded over others was a cheap imitation of the raw, chilling terror that now gripped him. I am on my way," he stammered, his voice barely a whisper. He dropped the phone back into its cradle, the click unnaturally loud in the silent room. He did not call for his driver. He did not grab his coat or his hat. He simply stood, turned, and walked out of his office, past his bewildered guards who called after him. He did not hear them. His mind was a roaring white noise, filled only with the doctor's words, fighting for her life. He moved through the streets like a man in a trance, his long strides eating up the cobblestones. The citizens of the city, who usually scattered at the very sight of him, now saw a different man. They saw a man with a pale, haunted face, his eyes wide with a panic they did not think him capable of feeling. He did not see their stares. He saw only the path to the large, imposing stone building at the city's center, the hospital. Pushing through the heavy double doors, he was met with the smell of antiseptic and sickness, a smell that was the very opposite of his world of cigar smoke and expensive cologne. A stern-faced nurse at a central desk looked up, ready to challenge this frantic man who had burst in, but something in his desperate eyes stopped her. "Isabella," he choked out. "Where is she?" "A Dr. Rossi called me." The nurse, her demeanor softening slightly, nodded and led him down a long, echoing corridor. The sound of their footsteps was muffled by the waxed floors. She stopped outside a door at the end of the hall, pushing it open quietly. "She is in here. Please, be calm. She needs rest." Lorenzo stepped into the room, and the sight that met him stole the last of his breath. The room was small and white, filled with a cold, clear light from a single window. And in the center, in a narrow bed that seemed to swallow her, lay Isabella. She was so still, so pale. Her beautiful honey-colored hair was damp with sweat and splayed across the pillow like a dark halo. Her eyes were closed, deep shadows bruising the delicate skin beneath them. She looked fragile, like a porcelain doll that had been dropped, her life hanging by the most fragile of threads. Wires and tubes seemed to tether her to the world, and a machine beside the bed beeped a slow, steady rhythm that was the only proof her heart was still beating. He moved to her side as if drawn by an invisible string, his own powerful frame seeming to dwarf the small chair next to the bed. He sank into it, his movements clumsy. Slowly, hesitantly, he reached out and took her hand. It was so small and cold in his. He remembered that hand, how it used to fit so perfectly in his, how it used to be warm and full of life. Now it was limp, the skin almost translucent. He bowed his head, his forehead gently touching their clasped hands. The tears he had sworn he would never shed again, the tears of a broken boy, now fell freely for the woman he had never stopped loving. They fell onto the white sheet, darkening the fabric in small, sad spots. And then, for the first time since that day under the oak tree, he began to pray. It was not a fancy prayer, not one with beautiful words from a church book. It was a raw, desperate plea, torn from the deepest, most hidden part of his soul. "Please," he whispered, his voice cracking with a sob. "Please, God. I know I have not been a good man. I have walked away from you. I have been proud and angry and cruel. I have no right to ask you for anything. But please, not her. Do not take her. She is the only good thing I ever had. The only good thing I ever knew. Please, save her. I will do anything. I will give it all up. Just please, save her." He stayed there, kneeling by her bed, his prayer a silent, continuous stream rising from his shattered heart, a heart that was finally, after all these years, breaking open not in anger, but in a desperate, faith-filled hope. Lorenzo did not leave Isabella's side. The world outside the small hospital room ceased to exist. The powerful men who came looking for him were turned away by his guards, who now stood watch not to keep people out, but to ensure their boss's solitude. The ledgers and maps lay forgotten on his office desk, their importance washed away by the steady, rhythmic sound of Isabella's breathing. Days blurred into nights, marked only by the comings and goings of nurses and the soft, solemn visits from Dr. Rossi. Lorenzo kept his vigil, his large hand perpetually enveloping Isabella's small one, as if his own strength could somehow be transferred to her, as if his will alone could anchor her to this world. He spoke to her in a low, steady voice, telling her about the sunlight on the cobblestones outside her window, about the bird that perched on the ledge each morning, about memories of the meadow he had locked away for years. He did not know if she could hear him, but he spoke anyway, his words a constant, gentle stream against the silence of her illness. And he continued to pray, his conversations with God becoming as natural as his conversations with her, a humble and ongoing plea for a miracle he knew he did not deserve. Then, on the fifth morning, as a pale, early light filtered into the room, Lorenzo, who had fallen into a fitful sleep with his head resting on the edge of her bed, felt a slight movement. His eyes snapped open. Isabella's fingers twitched within his grasp. He looked up and saw her eyelids flutter, like the fragile wings of a butterfly, before slowly opening. Her gaze was clouded with confusion and weakness, drifting around the unfamiliar room before finally settling on him. There was no fear in her eyes, only a deep, weary wonder. She tried to speak, but her voice was a dry, faint rustle. He quickly brought a cup of water to her lips, supporting her head with a tenderness that surprised even him. After a few sips, she sank back onto the pillow, her eyes never leaving his face. "Lorenzo," she whispered, the name a question and an answer all at once. "I am here, Isabella," he said, his own voice thick with emotion. "I am right here." Her recovery was a slow and delicate process, like a flower slowly turning its face back toward the sun. Lorenzo was there for every moment, reading to her, ensuring she ate, his formidable presence now dedicated entirely to her comfort. As her strength returned, so did the unspoken questions that hung between them. One afternoon, when the light was warm and golden in her room, she finally found the courage to give them voice. She looked at him, truly looked at him, seeing past the expensive clothes and the hardened lines of his face to the young man she had once known. "Why?" she asked softly, her hand still in his. "Why are you here, Lorenzo? After all this time? After I hurt you." Lorenzo took a deep breath, the moment of truth he had both dreaded and longed for. He did not hide from it. The doctor called me, he explained gently. He said you were calling my name. He saw the faint color rise in her pale cheeks. Isabella, when I heard you were sick, it was like the entire world stopped. Nothing else mattered. Not my business, not my pride, nothing. He looked down at their joined hands, then back into her eyes, his gaze open and unguarded for the first time in a decade. You asked me why I am here. It is because I never stopped loving you. The anger I carried, it was just my love for you, turned sour and sharp because I did not know how to hold on to it after you were gone. Tears welled in Isabella's eyes. I said no to you, she said, her voice trembling, because I was so afraid. I saw the anger growing in you, a storm that was going to consume you. I could not say yes and watch the man I loved disappear into that darkness. It broke my heart to refuse you, but I was more afraid of losing you forever to that path. Her words did not bring back the old anger, instead, they washed it completely away. He finally understood. Her rejection had not been a dismissal of him, but a desperate, failed attempt to save him. You were right, he admitted, his voice full of a profound and weary regret. The path I chose, it was all darkness. It made me powerful, but it made me a ghost. Empty. Alone. Coming here, sitting by your bed, praying for you, it was the first time I have felt real in years. He leaned closer, his expression one of earnest promise. I have left it all behind, Isabella. The business, the men, that entire life. It is over. I am done with it. I want a different life. A quiet life. A good life. He paused, his heart pounding as it had under the oak tree so long ago. I know I have no right to ask, but, could you ever forgive me? Could we possibly have a second chance? Isabella looked at this man, once a boy full of stormy potential, now humbled and remade by fear and prayer. She saw the sincerity shining in his stormy eyes, the love that had somehow survived years of bitterness. She saw not the feared mafia boss, but the Lorenzo she had always believed was hidden inside. A slow, beautiful smile spread across her face, the first true smile he had seen since her awakening. She squeezed his hand. Yes, she whispered, her voice clear and sure. There is nothing to forgive. My answer is yes. The news brought a joy to Lorenzo that was more profound than any power he had ever wielded. He immediately sought out Father Marco, finding the old priest tending the small garden behind his church. When Father Marco saw Lorenzo approaching, he saw a man transformed, the hardness in his face replaced by a peaceful purpose. Lorenzo told him everything, his repentance, his renewed faith, and his hope to marry Isabella. Father Marco's eyes filled with joyful tears, and he embraced the young man like a lost son returning home. The wedding was not a grand affair. It was held in the small, sun-drenched church, its simple stone walls echoing with the purity of their vows. Isabella wore a simple, elegant dress, her health returned and her face radiant. Lorenzo stood beside her, his gaze fixed on her as if she were the only person in the world. As they exchanged their promises before God and Father Marco, the last of the shadows in Lorenzo's heart melted away, replaced by a light he thought had been extinguished forever. They moved into a clean, bright house on the edge of the city, a home filled with light and laughter, a home they built together after they were married, beginning their new life not in sin, but in the sanctity and blessing of their faith, a testament to the redemptive power of a second chance. The year that followed Lorenzo and Isabella's wedding was a quiet poem of happiness, a gentle rhythm of days woven together with peace and purpose. The formidable man who once commanded fear now found his greatest joy in simpler things, in the smell of bread baking in the kitchen, in the warmth of the sun on his face as he worked in their small garden, and in the sound of Isabella's laughter echoing through the halls of their modest home. They attended Mass each Sunday with Father Marco, their presence a quiet testament to the miracle that had transformed their lives. Lorenzo, once so proud and isolated, now found strength in humility, his powerful frame often seen helping a neighbor repair a fence or carrying supplies for the church. He had truly become a new man, his past life a shadow that grew fainter with every act of kindness, with every prayer of gratitude whispered at the start and end of each day. Isabella bloomed in this atmosphere of devoted love, her gentle spirit the heart of their home, her faith a steady, guiding light for them both. As the seasons turned, a new and profound blessing was bestowed upon them. Isabella discovered she was with child. The news filled their home with a reverent, bubbling joy. This child, conceived in the sacred bond of marriage, was a symbol of their future, a testament to the new life God had granted them in every way. Lorenzo would often sit with Isabella in the evenings, his hand resting gently on her growing belly, his heart swelling with a love so fierce and protective it nearly stole his breath. They spent the months in happy preparation, Lorenzo carefully crafting a small wooden cradle with his own hands, each stroke of the sandpaper a prayer, each nail driven a promise. Isabella sewed tiny garments, simple gowns and blankets from soft, era-appropriate cloth, her stitches neat and filled with love. Their home was filled with an air of excited, prayerful anticipation, a far cry from the cold silence of Lorenzo's old office. The day the child decided to enter the world was a day of controlled urgency and fervent prayer. Lorenzo, his face a mixture of awe and anxiety, rushed Isabella to the same city hospital where their second chance had begun. But this time, the halls did not echo with dread, they hummed with the sacred, universal energy of new beginnings. He waited, pacing not in anger but in hopeful supplication, his prayers now those of a faithful man, trusting in God's plan. After what felt like both an eternity and a single moment, a weary but beaming Dr. Rossi emerged to find him. "You have a daughter," the doctor said, his own professional demeanor softened by the miracle of life. "And Isabella is well. You can see them now." Lorenzo walked into the room, his steps soft and hesitant. Isabella lay propped up on pillows, tired but radiant, a look of serene triumph on her face. And in her arms, swaddled in one of the tiny, handmade blankets, was their daughter. She was so small, her face a perfect, pink rosebud, with a faint dusting of dark hair on her head. Lorenzo approached as if approaching the most holy of altars, his eyes filled with tears of pure, unadulterated joy. He knelt beside the bed, his large, calloused hand trembling as he reached out to gently stroke the baby's cheek. "She is so beautiful," he whispered, his voice choked with emotion. He looked at Isabella, his heart so full he thought it might break from the sheer weight of its happiness. "You are so beautiful. Thank you. Thank you." Isabella smiled, her own eyes shining. "We have decided on a name," she said softly, looking down at the tiny, sleeping face. "We will call her Gianna." The name, a sweet and graceful sound, seemed to fill the room with light. "Gianna," Lorenzo repeated, the word a prayer on his lips. He carefully took the baby from Isabella, cradling her in the strong crook of his arm. Gianna was so light, so incredibly small and fragile against his broad chest, her head no bigger than his hand. Dressed in the simple white gown Isabella had sewn for her, she was the very picture of innocence and new beginnings. As he looked down at his daughter, a profound sense of completion settled over his soul. This was the purpose he had been searching for his entire life. Not power, not wealth, not the fear of others, but this, the sacred duty to love, to protect, and to guide. He had been lost in the darkness, but faith had led him back. Love had healed his wounds. And now, this new life, this precious gift, was his to cherish forever. He made a silent vow then, not to the world, but to God and to his family. He would spend every remaining day of his life being a man worthy of this blessing. He would be a loving husband, a devoted father, and a faithful servant. The story of the feared mafia boss was now a closed book, a tale told only as a warning of a life without grace. The new story, just beginning, was one of faith, love, and the promise of forever after, a story that would be written in the simple, joyful moments of their lives together. And as the sun set outside the hospital window, casting a golden glow over his wife and newborn daughter, Lorenzo knew, with a certainty that filled his entire being, that he was finally, truly, home. If this story of redemption and the power of faith touched your heart, there are many more tales of hope, second chances, and God's endless grace waiting for you. We invite you to join our community of listeners by subscribing to the channel. Your subscription helps us continue to create these stories and share important moral lessons with everyone. It is a simple click, but it allows us to keep this light of hope shining brightly. Subscribe now, and do not miss the next journey.